Hello, everyone. Welcome to this video today. Today, I want to focus on Charlie in Guy Vanderhaeg's The Watcher, but I want to do that with a specific technique through first-person narration. Because if we want to understand Charlie in the story properly, we can't separate what he does from how he tells the story. He's the narrator. Charlie is not just the main character. That means every major event, every adult conflict, every humiliation, secret, judgment that comes to us through is filtered through his mind. And that matters a lot. In first person fiction, readers are never getting a neutral camera angle. We are getting a voice, we're getting a perspective, we're getting a consciousness that selects details, interprets people, and shapes meaning as it goes. So when we read Watcher, we're not just learning about Charlie through plot, we're learning about him through the way he notices things, the way he describes people, and the way he positions himself in relation to what happens in the story. So, first person narration reveals Charlie as a boy whose identity is built around watching, but the story gradually shows that watching is not innocent. Charlie begins as a quiet observer, but as the story develops, the more we see that his watchfulness is tied to judgment, secrecy, power, cruelty, and finally complicity. In the end, he's no longer just watching the adult world, he actually enters it. So let's start with where Charlie's identity comes from. Early in the story, Charlie explains that his childhood illness keeps him indoors. He's quiet and physically sidelined. He never spends so much time lying around recovering, and he becomes a watcher almost by necessity. He's not out doing things, he's observing, he's listening, he's noticing what adults say and do when they think nobody important is paying attention. So this is such an important beginning because it means Charlie's watchfulness is not just a personality quirk. It grows out of his situation. He's lonely, often excluded, and physically vulnerable because of his illness. But instead of turning inward completely, he turns outward. He studies people. He figures out early that if a child stays still enough and quiet enough, adults stop treating that child as fully present. And once that happens, all sorts of private things becomes visible. This is the first major thing first-person narration reveals in the story. Charlie learns to make observation into power. He cannot always act, but he can see. He cannot control adults, but he can know things about them. He cannot enter their world openly, but he can access it indirectly. And because Charlie himself is the one narrating, we don't just hear that he became observant, we feel how important observation is to his whole sense of self. There's also something slightly unsettling right from the start, too. Charlie's attention is drawn not to innocence or comfort, but to scandal, weakness, embarrassment, and hidden adult trouble. Even as a child, the things that catch his eye are not neutral. They tell us something about the kind of mind he's developing. Now, one of the reasons Charlie is such a compelling narrator in the story is that he is clearly bright. He notices patterns, he remembers details, he reads social situations very quickly. But here's the important point: perception is not the same thing as kindness. Charlie sees very well, but he doesn't always feel generously. In fact, one of the clearest things first person narration reveals is his tendency to judge people sharply. He looks at adults with a cool, often mocking intelligence. His father comes across as soft and ineffective. His grandmother appears formidable, hard, and verbally ruthless. Evelyn appears unstable and helpless. Thompson comes off as vain, theatrical, self important, and manipulative. Now, of course, some of those judgments may be fair. Thompson really is performative. Grandma really is hard. But that's exactly why Charlie is interesting. His insights are often strong, even convincing. And still, they tell us as much about him as they do about the people he describes. His narration is alive with classification. He sizes people up, he cuts them down, he strips away pretension. And because we're inside his voice, we begin to notice that Charlie takes a certain pleasure in this, in his ability to be perceptive. That's one of the most teachable things about the story, I think. First person narration doesn't just give us information, it gives us a tone. And Charlie's tone is often comic, ironic, and harsh. He's not a passive innocent, he's an active judge in this case. He watches adults as though he is both fascinated by them and superior to them. That combination, fascination and what we could call contempt, is one of the keys to his character. So if you say Charlie is observant, that's true, but it's not enough. He's observant in a way that reveals pride, emotional distance, and a habit of turning other people into material for his own silent interpretation, the watcher. Another important feature of narration is that Charlie is telling the story after the fact. There is a separation between the experiencing Charlie and the narrating Charlie. It's actually a retroactive story. He tells it from the future. And that distinction is essential. The child in the story is curious, bored, lonely, and captivated by adult drama. The older Charlie, the one telling us all about this later, has greater verbal precision, more irony, and a stronger sense of the power dynamics. That means the story works with a double perspective. On one level, we're watching a child stumble through situations he doesn't fully understand at the time. On another level, we're being guided by an older voice that clearly understands much, much more. The result is a sense of irony in the story, because sometimes the child sees an event before he can interpret it to its full extent, while the adult narrator frames it in a way that gives it sharper meaning. And this raises a crucial interpretive question. How does the older Charlie want us to see the younger Charlie? Does he want us to view him as vulnerable, as clever, as exceptional, as more perceptive than anyone else? Probably all of the above at different times in the story. That's one reason first person narration is so powerful here. Charlie is not simply recounting events, he's also presenting a version of himself. This doesn't make him an unreliable narrator in the simple sense. The study documents that I provided, they're careful about that when I present them. Charlie sees a lot, and much of what he notices is persuasive, but he's still selective, still proud in what he does, still invested in how the story comes out. So readers should trust his eye while staying alert to his motives. That's an important part of the reader here. That's exactly what good first person narration does. It makes us feel close to the narrator while also forcing us to read critically. And the watcher does both of these things. Now we can move on to one of the strongest recurring patterns in the story. Charlie's repeatedly experiencing the world from hiding. He watches from outside windows, he listens from doorways, I'm trying to pull this up on the screen a little bit. He places himself on the edges of scenes rather than in the center of them. These are not random details that are just provided by the older Charlie. They're structural habits. This is how Charlie lives in the story. He's a watcher from the edges, from the rand. And once again, the first person narration is what makes this so effective, because Charlie tells the story himself. We're drawn into the appeal of this hidden vantage point. It's like a voyeur. Watching gives him access without exposure. He gets knowledge without having to declare himself. He gets proximity without responsibility, at least at first. And this is especially important in relation to Thompson and Evelyn, those two characters that show up at Grandma's farm. Charlie's fascinated by them. Charlie thinks that Thompson is novel, theatrical, educated, performative, a kind of spectacle on the farm. Evelyn is emotionally unstable and caught in a relationship Charlie can sense is troubled. Charlie watches them with a hunger. He wants secrets. He wants insight. He wants the thrill of seeing what others are not supposed to see. But there's a moral question growing underneath all of this. What does it mean to watch and not intervene? The story gradually pushes us towards that question. Charlie's hiddenness, if you want to call it that, looks harmless at first, even understandable. But over time, his role as watcher becomes less innocent. the more he sees, the more his distance begins to look like a form of detachment, and maybe a rehearsal for something even darker. If we want the clearest proof that Charlie is not just an innocent observer, we need to look at the Stanley episode, The Rooster. Charlie's killing of Stanley the Rooster is one of the most disturbing revelations in the story. It shows that beneath his watchfulness, there is anger, frustration, and a desire to exercise control. What makes this scene so powerful is the narration, because Charlie tells it himself. We're not just simply told that he did something violent. We're taken through the escalation of that little event step by step. We see how irritation turns into confrontation, how confrontation turns into excitement, and how excitement turns into domination. The scene reveals a boy who's not merely just lashing out blindly. He's discovering the thrill of being a boss for once. That is such a disturbing phrase, I would say, in the context of Charlie's character. He spent the story being physically weak, dependent, and sidelined, as I said. Here, though, suddenly he has complete control over another creature. First person narration lets us see how intoxicating this feels to him. It lets us experience the moral danger from inside. And the story connects this violence to the adult world Charlie has been observing all the time. He's surrounded by humiliation. He's surrounded by force, manipulation, domination, weakness. Sees that in other people. The story doesn't excuse what he does to Stanley, but it clearly places it in that atmosphere. Charlie's been watching power for a long time. Now he wants to experiment with it. So by this point, the first person narration has revealed Charlie is not only perceptive, he's also capable of cruelty. And that changes how we read everything that comes afterward. And the final revelation comes when Thompson is beaten and the constable questions Charlie. Remember when the Ogden brothers show up in the story? Here we go. Yeah, when the Ogden brothers show up in this story, we're going to move it. Charlie knows enough to identify those men. He was in the car with Grandma when he saw them. He's seen what happened, and he sees the knowledge that could change the outcome. And then he chooses silence with the police officer. He denies what he knows. And this is the turning point in the whole story, because it's this moment when observation becomes action. It's the arc of his character. Charlie's silence is not passive, it's strategic. It protects him. It aligns him with a power structure that he wants to be a part of. It signals that he understands exactly where he stands and who can protect him. Thompson's weak. This is how Charlie sees it in the end. But Grandma is not. So Charlie makes that calculation. Remember, I talked about cruelty. And because this is first person narration once again, we do not receive that decision from the outside. We receive it from the narrator himself, shaped by his memory, his justification, and his sense of what the moment meant. That makes the ending a little more unsettling. We've been trained by the story. We've been trained by the story to share Charlie's watchfulness, and then we realize that watchfulness has become complicity. And this is why the title, Watcher, becomes ironic by the end. Charlie's not just watching anymore. He's playing the game, so to speak. He's participating in the adult world of power struggles, and he finds that he's good at it. So if I were to sum this up in one teaching point, I'd say that first-person narration here reveals Charlie not as simply a child observer, but as a developing moral consciousness, shaped by secrecy, judgment, and his desire for power. His illness teaches him to watch. His intelligence makes him an excellent observer. His tone reveals his harshness. His hidden vantage point reveals his attachment to secrecy. Stanley episode reveals his capacity for cruelty. And the ending reveals that watching is never fully neutral. Charlie's silence makes him a participant in the very world he's been observing. In Watcher, Charlie's first person narration draws us into this power of seeing, and then forces us to confront that seeing is not without innocence. Thank you, everyone. There's going to be another video on Thompson and Grandma. I'll see you in the discussion boards.